We are in Genesis 32 as we left Jacob last time. He had returned from Padan Aram up in Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia is a Greek word. Meso means middle. Potamia means water, middle of the waters. That is in between the Tigris and Euphrates, that whole area. And Haran is in northern Mesopotamia. Abram and his family moved from southern Mesopotamia to northern Mesopotamia and were there for a while before he came down to the promised land. So anyway, we left Jacob at Gilead, in the mountains of Gilead. His father-in-law Laban had followed him, pursued him. For lots of reasons. Jacob kind of snuck off and took all the daughters and grandkids. But then also we saw Rachel had taken the household idols. We talked about that quite a bit last week. And hid them. So Laban chased him down to Gilead, was acting like he was going to kill him. Finally they came to an agreement, made a covenant together. And that's where we pick up this week as we begin Genesis chapter 32. So right there is Gilead, where Jacob is. So we start out looking at the angels of God. Now this is a very interesting thing. At both ends of this chapter, we have angels involved. Jacob is right on the border of the land of Israel. Verse 1 starts out, so Jacob went on his way, leaving Laban, and the angels, and we use that word angels. Angels is from the Greek word angelos. It's just almost a straight transliteration from angelos to angels. And angelos is message, news, word. It is one who brings the news, a messenger. And we have gone from that. We have taken it from a messenger to, we've created all kind of a harp and wings and all those things. Doesn't talk about those in the Bible. Now, there is some confusion. There are some heavenly beings. There are some beings in heaven called cherubim that have wings. And maybe those are angels and maybe they're not. But I think that's where we get the wings. But generally, they're just called messengers. And here we'll see, likely later we'll see a character, and he's just called a man. He's not saying a man with wings or a man playing a golden harp, just a man. Likely he's one of these messengers. Now that word, angels or messengers, is malaki. And I only give you that because there's wordplay, lots of wordplay going on in this. And we'll see in a minute. These are messengers of God, came and met him at this place on the border of the land. When Jacob saw them, he said, this is the camp of God, the Machane. So, Malaki, Machane. You see this a lot intentionally. We've got to remember, we are from a reading culture. We read things, and that communicates to our brains differently than being spoken to. You know this. Can you follow me better when we're here in Bible study and you're seeing my face and you see my facial expressions and my body actions, or if I wrote down exactly what I said and gave it to you and you read it? Which would you get more from? From me standing up here, because you take in more clues. Same thing. The Bible started out as oral tradition. And one of the things that made it interesting to hear these stories was this, the rhythm of how they spoke and the interesting sounds that came out. The Malaki of Elohim came, and he said, this is Elohim's Machineh. And we see here the New King James Version translates that. Basically, it says this is God's camp. He called the name of the place camp. But in one place, they transliterated from Hebrew to English and said camp. And in the other place, they didn't. They just left it in Hebrew, left the Hebrew word. I'm not sure why. This is God's camp, his Makaneh, and he called the name of the place Makanaim. And that's just a plural. That's like if he said Makaneh with an S on the end in English. Im on the end of a Hebrew word is plural. So this is camps. He called the name of the place camps. So chapter 32 also ends with, with Jacob wrestling angels. That's a little bit of a mystery. It says he wrestled a man who represented God. And so there is an emphasis here in this chapter, here on the border with lots of angels. So why all the angels? Anybody got an idea why we're seeing so many angels all of a sudden at this place on the borders of the land of Israel? Why didn't he see angels in Haran? Well, he is returning. I think the key to unlocking this is he is returning to the land. In the beginning, God made the land. Haaretz, the land. This is the land of promise. And we've been studying that since we started out in Genesis, haven't we? Everything revolves around the land. Remember a previous exit. If we go back a couple times ago in the land, when Adam and Eve left the garden, the land, could they walk right back into the garden? Why couldn't they walk right back in? It was guarded by an angel. Aha. Remember the previous exit in Genesis 3:24? So God drove out the man, and he placed cherubim at the east of the Garden of Eden, and a flaming sword which turned in every way to guard the way to the tree of life. So I think the author is trying to make a significant connection that he is returning to the place of relationship with God, and there are angels there on the borders as he goes in. Now, what is interesting about this, there are angels there. Are they blocking his way? Not really. It reminds me of another time when the children of Israel are going into the land in the book of Joshua. Joshua chapter 5. They're coming back into the land of Israel. Joshua was by Jericho. He lifted his eyes and looked. A man stood opposite him with a sword drawn. Joshua said to him, "Are you," and this is fascinating to me, why is Joshua in the land? Yeah. Moses ain't God, right? God told him, right? Yes, you got it right. God told him to go in, so he's being obedient. Even still, why would he say this to this man? Because the man looks scary. He's guarding. Jericho is on the east-west highway that crosses the... Jericho is a walled, fortified city, and so it's a garrison that guards. That's an invasion route coming from the southeast across the Jordan River. And so this is a big, scary guy with a sword that is guarding this invasion route. Faye?
I was reading just yesterday that it wasn't God's idea for them to send spies in. It was man's idea. It's in Deuteronomy.
Huh.
That a bunch of men came to Moses. I think it's Deuteronomy 19:21 or 21:19. But a bunch of men came to Moses and said, "Let's send some spies in." And Moses agreed with them. God told them to go in and take the land.
Yeah.
But they come to Moses and they said, "Yeah, so God let them do what they're willing to do, just like He gave them a king and everything else."
Well, that's interesting. I'll have to look at that. It's always it is interesting to me because very much with Jacob. Jacob epitomizes something that you're touching on, and that is that there's this very interesting thing between God giving man his will and, commanding him to do things. He hasn't commanded Jacob a lot. I say command. He says, as you go, I'll go with you, and I'll help you, and I'll bring you back to this land. There's not really a commandment in there. But how he allows Jacob to make decisions, good and bad decisions. And so God is guiding Jacob. God is blessing Jacob and protecting Jacob. But he is not, as far as you can tell from reading the story, he is not forcing his will on Jacob. And so here in Joshua, Joshua looks at the guy. Joshua is scared. Are you going to kill me? Are you here to wipe us out? Why would a man, is it appropriate that man should fear God? Is it appropriate that Joshua, who is following God's will by way of Moses, is it appropriate that he would think that God could wipe them out? Would there be any reason for God to wipe out the children of Israel? It's kind of a loaded question, baited question. I say we all need to have that kind of respect for God. This is where we get inverted. We feel that our territory, that we have sovereignty over ourselves, that we control the space we're in, and we own the stuff that we own, and God can back off, and I think that's a wrong view. I think that's why we get in trouble. And so we can say, back off, God. I don't want to follow you. But I believe the true perspective and the biblical perspective is every heartbeat is a blessing of God. Every possession is on loan from God. Even human relationships. Our spouse is not our spouse so much as it is the person that God has blessed us with.
God had a covenant with Abraham. He has to fulfill that covenant. Period. Somehow, some way.
Yeah, well, yeah, I would resist the way you said that a little bit. God is truth, and he makes a covenant in truth, and so he can't not be truthful. He can't not follow a covenant, because in his nature, if God says it, he does it. So yes, he had to do it, is another way of saying that. Okay, I believe it's appropriate to have a respect. God, thank you for not killing me today. I almost think that is a more appropriate view of our life than the way we mostly see our lives. And that is, we are entitled to this and that, and we own the stuff we own, and we have reached out and ambitiously took what we wanted from life, and God needs to just back off. If I want to follow you, I will. If I don't, I won't. We have a very arrogant view. So I actually think that Joshua's response to this man is appropriate. Are you going to kill me? Yes, the Lord told us to come in, but maybe our disobedience and our sin, maybe God's calling our debt due, our spiritual debt due. And the man says, so the man said, no, but I come rather as commander of the army of the Lord. I have come to fight with you. As you go into this land, and as you carry out the things that God has told you to do, as you carry out this war to drive out the Canaanites, I have given y'all this land. I own this land. And I have told the Canaanites they got to go. They're not going. And so I am sending you to drive them out. This is your land now. This is a powerful statement that God, yes, Yahweh told them to go into the land, and he is coming to fight with them. As they win a victory, it is because he is fighting with them. The commander of the army of the Lord, I have come. Joshua fell on his face and worshiped, saying, what does the Lord say to his servant? And the angel said to Joshua, take your sandal off, for the place where you stand is holy, and Joshua did so. What does that phrase, take your sandal off, the place is holy, what does that remind us of? The burning bush with Moses. Yes. You're on holy ground. God is speaking. That was where God initiated the return to the land. They were in slavery, in the bond. We would say in the bondage of sin. They were in the physical bondage to the Egyptians. God said, I'm going to save my people to Moses, and he initiated it. Take it off. I'm telling you something holy, something different, something man can't do. And now we see the culmination or the fruition of that command. And they're entering in, you might say figuratively, into salvation and into the land of relationship with God. And there is another man, the guardian, who says, no, I've come to welcome you and participate in your re-entry. The garden was never closed off from God's will in your life. The garden was closed off to your will of re-entry, doing it on your own steam. And I would say also that last phrase jumps out at me, and Joshua did so. That's the definition of Joshua. Joshua did so. Joshua is obedient. He is a little bit of a flat character in the Bible. We don't know a lot about him. He doesn't talk a lot. We don't know side stories. They don't tell any bad stories on him, which is rare. He is one of the few really good guys that we hear about, maybe the only one in the Old Testament. Joseph is pretty good, but Joseph can get a little cantankerous at times. But Joshua obeys, and Joshua did so. Faye?
One thing that I can't understand about Joshua is, why didn't he elect somebody to take his place like Moses did when he died?
Well,
I never have been able to understand that.
Well, I believe, I don't know the answer. I've not really ever thought about it. But a quick speculation would be that it was never God's intention to have a dynasty of that kind of leadership. Israel had to see, the story the first part of Joshua, they work together under a leader, and God gives them success because it's godly leadership. And then God lets each tribe have its land and rule themselves, and that things fall apart. And that's the book of Judges is about the chaos that they have. And it said every man did what was right in his sight. Now, if God kept that from happening, what then? I guess it would be good, but why not just send Jesus? Why not skip everything and just send Jesus to rule with an iron rod? My answer would be there's a process going on here. He is laying the way for the need for a king. But a king is bad because a king is a secular leader. The king is going to try to make trade and create wealth and those kind of things. The king is going to need soldiers, so he's going to conscript, and it's no longer a volunteer army, etc., etc. And all that's going to lead them into captivity in Babylon. And so full circle, God saved them from captivity, and they make choices that put them back in captivity. Well, who's going to save them? Well, the end of the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible ends with 2 Chronicles, and they are in captivity. And 2 Chronicles is a reflection back on the whole. It's basically a commentary on the rest of the Bible, 2 Chronicles. And they're reflecting, and they are awaiting a king to come and deliver them. Okay? I do not think that is an accidental ending. And I think the Hebrew ending, there are several books, Ezra, Nehemiah, all those things happen after Chronicles. And that's why in our Bible, we have those books that happen after Chronicles. But in the Hebrew Bible, it ends with this expectation. We are in captivity, but God is sending a man, probably a descendant of David. We're awaiting a descendant of David to come and lead us out of captivity. And I think that is the intention of the Old Testament. So that self-reflection where you can see we started out in captivity, God led us out of captivity, we put ourselves back in there, and he's going to send a man to bring us all out And where they have a little trouble, the Jews have a little trouble realizing the man came, and one reason they reject him, one of the big reasons, in my opinion, Rex's opinion, red flag it, that they reject Jesus is because in his death he opened the door for the nasty Gentiles. All the pagans get to come in, and that's just unthinkable. All right, so after the angels, Jacob turns his attention, after he deals with the angels, hello, I'm coming back in, I'm going to call this God's camp. Then he turns his attention back to Esau. Verse 3, chapter 32, verse 3. Then Jacob sent out messengers, okay? Wordplay again. There were messengers of God waiting to welcome him into the land, and immediately he sends out Malachim himself, messengers. Why do we not call these angels? Well, because it's in Hebrew, but it's the same word. It's the exact same word. Those angels are just messengers of God. That's the point I'm making. And more often than not, they're called men. And when people see them, now that's cherubim at the garden probably has wings, because when they make the Ark of the Covenant, they put wings on the creatures. But those I think I say the Garden of Eden was, I believe, where Israel is today. But Israel is not the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden is heaven. And so I believe the cherubim is significant for the Garden of Eden. But what is going back to the land of promise, going back to the land where we will fellowship with God, getting within a sinful world. Sin is here. How close can we approximate what we had in heaven in the Garden of Eden? Well, there's a man, a warrior, standing there, and that's the equivalent. Anyway, but I believe angels are just men. They're spiritual men, but they're men, and there's no wings. Then Jacob sent messengers, Malachim, before him to Esau his brother in the land of Seir in the country of Edom. So this is down in Edom. And so what I want to watch, what we always have to watch with Jacob is Jacob, what he says is good. What he does is questionable, almost always. He says that he believes God, but the first thing he does is begin making a plan to take care of himself. And so there is a map of the land of Israel, several places that we've talked about. Shechem is important. He'll be there in the next chapter in Shechem. Shechem is important again in chapter 34. He is north of there in Gilead, and then he comes back down, and here he's camping in Peniel. It's not named Peniel till the end. Pen is face. Peniel, El is God, face of God is what Peniel means. But you see Edom down there to the southeast of the Dead Sea. That area is Edom. We know Esau, because Esau had red hair, they called him Edom, and so this is his descendants where they lived, in the land of Edom. Does anybody remember a king descended from the Edomites that plays a big part in the Jesus story, when Jesus was a baby? King Herod is an Edomite. He is an Idumean, they say, in Greek, but that's just an Edomite. So he is a non-Israelite. That's one of the problems with Herod. Herod is not an Israelite by descendants. He's a descendant of Esau. And they're traditional enemies. So there is where Edom is, and Mount Seir. So there's where Jacob's camp is, and then right about there is Mount Seir, where Esau dwells. And so that's a pretty long distance that he sends out messengers to contact Esau that he is coming. And so I call this kissing up to Esau in verse 4, and Jacob commanded them, saying. Speak thus to my lord Esau. Thus says your servant Jacob. Now God had said, the younger shall rule the older. And so, but Jacob says, oh, that's not really safe for me. So I'm going to say, your servant Jacob. I have dwelt with Laban, our uncle, and stayed there until now. I have oxen, I have donkeys, flocks, male and female servants, and I have sent these guys to tell my lord Esau that I might find favor in your sight. Okay? Pretty nice. Uh-oh. What happens? Then the messengers returned to Jacob from Seir, saying, we came to your brother Esau, and he also is coming to meet you. And 400 men are with him. Uh-oh. So remember the last time? Does anybody remember what Esau said last time we saw him in chapter 27? So Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing with which his father blessed Jacob. And Esau said in his heart, the days of mourning for my father are at hand. When they are over, then I will kill my brother Jacob. So Jacob has good reason to fear. Very ominous. Needless to say, Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. So what do you think Jacob did? This is on me, y'all. I have got this mess. Y'all back up. Y'all head the other direction. I'm going to go out and meet Esau and talk to him like a man. God has told me that he is with me. What have I got to fear from Esau? No. He divided the people that were with him and the flocks and herds and camels into two companies. So he divided everybody to two, ever the planner and schemer, Jacob. And he said, if Esau comes on one company and attacks it, then the other one, maybe they can escape. Let me go ahead and tell everybody, I plan to be with the ones that escapes. It doesn't say that here. To me, that's the subtext. That's written between the lines. I, Jacob, plan to be with whichever side escapes. And to prove that, we'll see in a minute how he camps. Is Jacob's fear reasonable? Does he have reason to be feared? Yeah, he does. Just like us, we face things that are worrisome, troublesome, fearful every day. Every day. I mean, there's really, not to be gloomy, but there's no guarantee that any of us will be back. Any one of us or all of us will be back here again next week. Is his response reasonable? I don't think so. I think it might be reasonable from a human perspective, but it's selfish and it is not faith in God. God said, I'll keep you. I'll be with you. I'll protect you. So what I want to look at is kind of the message of the Old Testament as it pertains to people of faith being able to rely on God. And I'm gonna hit you with a bunch here. Psalms 32:7. God, you are my hiding place. You will protect me from trouble and surround me with songs of deliverance. Psalm 46:1. God is our refuge and strength and ever-present help in trouble. Not sometimes, not on occasion, but ever-present. Deuteronomy 31:6. Be strong and courageous, Israel, people of faith. Do not be afraid or terrified because of the enemies. For the Lord your God, that is Yahweh your God, is with you. He will never leave you or forsake you. Sometimes it may feel like it, but he is there. Psalm 18:35 and 36. You make your saving help my shield, O Lord, and your right hand sustains me. Your help has made me great. You provide a broad path for my feet so that my ankles do not give way. Isaiah 54:17. No weapon forged against you will prevail, and you will refute every tongue that accuses you. This is the heritage of the servants of Yahweh, and this is their vindication from me, declares Yahweh. Exodus 14:14. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Psalms 118:6. Yahweh is with me. I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? Is that what Jacob is doing? No. Psalms 114. You are my refuge and my shield. I have put my hope in your word. Proverbs 4:23. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Isaiah 46:4. Even to your old age and gray hairs, I am he. I am he who will sustain you. Is this just when you're young? This pertains to all of us here. I have made you, and I will carry you. I will sustain you, and I will rescue you. Psalm 16:8. I keep my eyes always on Yahweh. With him at my right hand, I will not shake. Life gives me good reason to shake, but as long as I've got my eyes on him, I will not shake. Psalm 18:30. As for God, his way is perfect. Yahweh's word is flawless. He shields all who take refuge in him. I think that last sentence is important. Those who seek his shield, he provides. Now, we get in trouble because we hear a phrase like that and say, okay, this is the way you can protect me, Lord, and that's not the way it works. But when we seek God's protection, he will work things out. Not to mention what he said already to Jacob. We referred to this back in Genesis 28:15. Before Jacob ever left the land, God said, I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go. And I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Yet another way that Jacob is like us, and I really do. I think Jacob is important because he is like us. We all behave like Jacob. We all have great faith until we need it, and then not so good. Jacob forgets the promises that God's made to him. So Jacob prayers. Now, Jacob's prayer is important, and it is the key here. I truly believe what Jacob says is what sustains him, not what he does. And I think truly what we have going on here is the same. The struggle with Jacob, the conflict with Jacob is the same conflict we all face, and that is between trusting God and us taking care of our own business and controlling our own life. That's a thin line we all walk. Then Jacob said, "O God, O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, Yahweh who said to me, return to your country and to your family, and I will deal well with you." He adds that last little phrase. I will take care of you, as God says, and he says, I will deal well with you. I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies and of all the truth which you have shown me. Okay, that's well said. True. For I crossed over this Jordan with my staff, and now I've become two companies. I've come back wealthy. You did that. And that is a key kind of to unlocking some of the past stories. Jacob knows, and Jacob battles. Jacob, on one hand, knows that God is God, knows that God is the source of all that is good for him, knows that the blessing comes from God. On the other hand, God just don't move fast enough. And Jacob is the ultimate one to hedge his bets. Faith alone, gosh, just can't trust that. He goes on in his prayer. God deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he come and attack me, and the mother with the children. For you said, I will surely treat you well, and make your descendants as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. Very nice prayer here. Now, let me ask you a question about prayer. Your understanding of God. This is a theological question. Do you think prior to this prayer, God had decided, I'm just going to let Esau kill him? But after Jacob prays this sincere prayer, God changes his mind and says, well, you know what? That was really well said, Jacob. I believe I'm going to save you now. How many think that God was going to allow Esau to kill him before Jacob prayed? Okay, why do you shake your head, Faye?
Because God had made him a promise that he'd
God had long ago made him a promise. I tend to believe that God knew exactly what he was going to do before he created Jacob, before he created the world. So, this is there is a conflict in Jacob between what he says and what he does. There's a struggle, a wrestling match. Is God participating in the wrestling match with Jacob? I say no. I say God doesn't wrestle back with Jacob. God said, I'm going to bless you. I didn't say that, and then I'm going to let Esau eat you up. I think the whole metaphor, if you will, the whole thing that we're looking at in chapter 32 is the wrestling is inside of Jacob. Jacob is wrestling with his own nature, his sin, we would call it a sin nature, and he is wrestling between his need to control his destiny and his desire to let God be God in his heart. And I think that's the classic struggle that we all face. Goes on in verse 13, so he lodged there that same night, and he took, listen, so he prayed a really good prayer, right? God deliver me. So then he says, now, everybody get back. I'm going to go out and meet Esau. I've prayed. God's going to answer my prayers, right? No. So he lodged there that same night, and he took what came to his hand as a present, everything he could collect, as a present for Esau. So he increases, I think here, his gifts. 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 30 milk camels with their colts, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, and 10 foals. That's a lot of wealth as a gift. And he sets that out in front of everybody in the path that Esau is coming. Then he delivered them to the hand of his servants. Every drove by itself, and he said to his servants, pass over before me. Go out, get out in front of me, and put some distance between successive droves. Space out the different groups of animals so there'll be lots of gifts. So if he gets mad and kills the first bunch and takes the stuff, there'll be another gift a little bit long. He'll kill them and take it. Maybe by the third or fourth drove or group of animals that are gifts from me to him, maybe that'll cool his anger. Pass over before me, successive droves. He commanded the first one, saying, when Esau my brother meets you and asks you, saying, to whom do you belong and where are you going? Whose are these in front of you? Then you shall say, they are your servant Jacob's, belong to him, and it is a present sent to my lord Esau. And behold, he also is coming behind us, because he really wants to see you, Esau. So he commanded the second and the third, and all who followed the droves. He just sent wave after wave of gifts to Esau, saying, in this manner you shall speak to Esau when you find him. Okay, so he prayed, God, protect me. And then he sent wave after wave of appeasing gift to Esau. Do you think he's done? Do you think he's Now I can relax. I'm going to follow that last group. I'm going to put the women and the children back, and I'm going to go and face Esau like a man. Well, let's see what happens. Verse 20. And also say, behold, your servant Jacob is behind us, for he said, I will appease him with the presence that goes before me, and afterward I will see his face. Perhaps he will forgive me. So the present went on. So the present went on over before him, but he himself lodged that night in the camp. So he sent them across the river, just in case Esau does not, cool down like he's hoping he will. He'll have the river between them. He'll have a chance to run. Now, I'm giving you interpretation. I'm not a big Jacob fan. We're human. We like some characters better than others. Verse 22. Was that enough? Well, he arose that night from the camp with the river between him and the successive droves of animals of appeasement. And he took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, that's Bilhah and Zilpah, and his 11 sons, and he crossed over the ford of Jabbok. Now we're going to see another wordplay here, series of wordplays. So he goes to camp at Jabbok. He took them and sent them over the brook and sent over what he had. So there was a river between them. Then he crossed a brook. So he left the camp there, and he took his wives and went over a brook. And then Jacob, so Jabbok and Yaakov was left alone. So he put his wife and children, and then he crossed over a brook. So he was in the very back. So he had the successive droves of animals out driving to Esau. Then he had his main camp with his camp people that he had gained, his servants and everything, and his animals. Then he took his wife and kids and went across the brook and camped them. And then he went over another brook and he camped by himself in the back. All right, let me tell you, in the Old Testament, that is the opposite of what the father is supposed to do. The father is supposed to be the protector. And we're going to see this repeating pattern with Jacob where he does not step forward and lead. He does not he's not the man of the household when it comes to protecting and taking responsibility. Then Yaakov was left alone, and a man, a Yahabek, and so Yabak, Yaakov, Yahabek, with him until the breaking of day. That's wordplay. That's ticky-ticky-tock. That's poetry. So a man is likely an angel, and it's one of those things. These men are messengers of God, so they represent God, and so they're not God. God did not come down and get in a wrestling match with Jacob. There's no way that Hebrews, Israelites would say Jacob wrestled with God literally and whooped his can. All right? It's just not going to happen. And so if you interpret that way, I think you're way off. Like, it doesn't really say, but as we've seen these manifestations, we've talked about manifestations of God. It's safe to say it's an angel. Some people say that this is Jesus, that he's wrestling with Jesus, because Jesus is God became a man. That's very tenuous. I mean, I can see where somebody might say that. I think that's going beyond what the text is saying here. But this epitomizes Jacob's whole life. It is the physical that he represents, but it is the physical, that he wrestles. It is this internal conflict between the tangible, protecting the tangible stuff that I can hold in my hand, and honoring God. And when there's conflict between those two, I want to follow God, but I cannot be sure God is going to protect it. But his whole life he has struggled. Everything we've heard about him, first he struggled with Esau for the birthright and then the blessing in 25 and 27. He struggled with his own father in chapter 27. Then we had 3 chapters where he struggled with Laban over things. And so he has struggled his whole life. He is at war with everyone. But mainly he has struggled with himself, saying one thing and doing another. He has struggled with God in that, his relationship with God. Now, when he saw that he did not prevail against the man he was wrestling, now when the man saw, and it's capitalized there because it is a representative of God, when the man saw that Jacob kept fighting and kept fighting, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, and the socket of Jacob's hip was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And the man said, "Let me go, for the day breaks." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." Jacob has been fighting to be blessed by God. And what's wrong with that? What's wrong with him demanding to be blessed by God?
God's already told him he's going to bless.
God's already blessed him. It's a done deal. Do we ever do this? Do we ever refuse to see the blessings that God has given us and always want something more from God? I think that is all the time. I think that is the heart of man right there. And it is because we were made to live in a sinless world. We were made for the garden. Then we fell and were cast out. And we weren't created for sin. And sin is damaging. And sin, my old analogy, God is broadcasting on the radio, and all we hear is static. And static is annoying. And it's not that God is not broadcasting, it's not blessing. It's that we've got our antenna focused on something else. And rather than that something else satisfying us and fulfilling us and saying, "Now I am blessed," it is agitating to us. Because what we really want is to have it on God's station. We want to hear clearly. But we're not seeking that clarity in God. We're seeking it in other stuff. And it doesn't satisfy us. You know, go ask a billionaire if they have enough money. And none of them. The stingiest people I have met in my life, and I hadn't met a lot, are the wealthiest people. Because once you have money, you're not satisfied with that. Now, it does help. It does take some sharp corners off things. It smooths some corners. But it doesn't solve. It doesn't fix. It doesn't satisfy. So you think, well, maybe if I can double the money I have, then I can multiply the good, and the bad will go away, and I'll be satisfied. And it doesn't. I will not let you go unless you bless me. The true answer is, I've already blessed you. Jacob has been struggling since we met him. He struggles between ambition to fix and control his own life and his desire to follow God. I truly believe, based on the words that he says, that he wants to please God. And he does believe that God is the source of his blessing. He already prayed, "God, you've already blessed me." And then he wrestles all night with God. Then he tries to fix it so Esau can't hurt him. And then he wrestles all night with God. And he says, "Bless me. I won't let you go till you bless me." He started the night praying, "You've already blessed me, Lord." Again, I say Jacob's not here because he's a role model. Don't be like Jacob. Don't follow anything he does. Don't say it's in the Bible so I can do it. He's in there because he's relatable. He's like us. He struggles with his faith. Does Jacob get the blessing of God? Verse 27. So he, the man, said to him, "What's your name?" And he said, "Jacob." And he said, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel," Yisrael, which means strives with God, struggles with God. "For you have struggled with God and with men and have prevailed." Now, that last phrase is a little bit confusing. It indicates that he has victory. Did Jacob get the blessing that he desired? Yes, we've already said, long since. Not only the blessing of the line of descendancy, which is the key blessing, but he's also got physical blessings. And so he has struggled with God, and God has blessed him. We can go all the way back through all the blessings in Genesis, and Jacob has received them. And so he has achieved God's will in his life, but every inch has been a fight for him, a struggle, internal struggle. Then Jacob asked, saying, "Tell me your name, I pray." And the man said, "Why is it that you ask me my name?" And I think here the man is saying, if you don't know me by now, you're never, never, never going to know me. And he blessed Jacob there. So Jacob called the name of the place Pen-el, Pen being face in Hebrew, El being the Canaanite word for God. "For I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved." Okay? We get the same blessing through Christ. That's part of our salvation, that we can communicate with God and approach him, even though we're sinful and it should be death to us. Just as he crossed over Peniel, the sun came up and he limped on his hip. Therefore, to this day, the children of Israel do not eat the muscle that shrank, which is on the hip socket, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip in the muscle that shrank. And that is, even today, the Hasidic Jews, I think, some of the Orthodox Jews won't eat the tendon in the hip of animals. This is a big part of this story, that this is a good story, and so a lot of the elements are strange because the story is told to be a part of their tradition about not eating meats. That's not to say that things didn't happen in any way, but you should never read a story like this one and say, "Well, I believe a man can overpower God," because that's what it seems to indicate in this story. No, the story is formed this is a story that by the time it's written down by Moses has been around for hundreds of years. And Moses took this story and showed how, just like you and I struggle with these same struggles, Jacob of old had a metaphorical struggle with God. As the legend says, he wrestled with a man all night and it popped his hip out. But don't let that disrupt your theology. Does that make sense? This story, I think, and I think it's why we need to read the Bible in depth and look for the connections among scriptures, because the Hebrews would certainly never, never say that a man can overpower God, and that Jacob held on to God in physical presence, held on to Jesus, got Jesus in a headlock, and forced Jesus to bless him. That's not the point of this story. Uh, but a light reading, I suppose a light reading, you could make that case from it. The message here is Jacob struggled internally like we all do, but God was working a plan in spite of Jacob. And Jacob says, "Bless me," and basically God says, "I've already blessed you." and I'm going to continue because I said I would and because I love you. All right, that's the end there of chapter 32. We'll go to chapter 33 next week. Any questions or comments?